And thank you for Sarah and Hans-Peter for organizing this brilliant event. Thank you, Sarah, for the 90% that works, and thank you, Hans-Peter, for the 10% that doesn't work. The plan was to have this event in Berlin, but Berlin was completely booked. We couldn't find a venue that was possible to do it. So maybe the next workshop could be hosted by UVA. We are currently building a new house in Dessau, and we already planned the 2018 workshop at this house. So it wasn't finished until now, so nothing works there too. But maybe it will be the first workshop. The 0 PM workshop will be the first workshop there coming up. So 2018 was the workshop in Berlin, and that was 2 years before the Chemical Strategy for Sustainability, and now here we are 2 years after the Chemical Strategy for Sustainability. It's really impressive how many things happened since then. As you all know, we are working since 2009 on the scientific justification and the regulatory implementation of the PMT criteria. And it's just 10 years ago that I used the term PMT for the first time on a presentation in Leipzig. And really congratulations to Sylvain and his team. Well, is he in the room at the moment? The new CLP hazard classes, PMT and vPvM, are really brilliant, and we fully support them. If you look at them, they nearly took over the UVA proposal. Just the mobility criterion is a little bit lower, so it's less stringent, it's less inclusive, which means if you have a persistent or very persistent substance, you lose around 24% substances that will not have the label of being PMT or vPvM. So they are still persistent and very persistent, but they are no longer PMT or vPvM. So I'm guessing this is the next thing we have to look at in future. What we did is we looked at the whole REACH registration database together with Hans-Peter and Sarah, and we identified the unique chemical structure that we were able to assess. And I have a bad news and a good news. The bad news is 41% we are not able to perform a PMT vPvM assessment. So for 40% substances in the REACH registration database, there's insufficient data. That's a lot. That's really, where's my colleague from ECHA? Kostas is already writing down. I think we have to tackle that. But the good news is we found only 260 chemicals that do fulfill the PMT vPvM criteria. That's already the CLP criteria. So please first look at the left lower corner. This is the 1.9% or the 260 chemicals in the REACH registration database that fulfill the criteria. And one of the critics 2018 from industry was we should look at monitoring data. And that's what we did. We did a literature review. It's going to be published soon this year, 2000 to 2019, and we found 639 chemicals that have already been detected in drinking water relevant media. So in infiltration, groundwater, raw water, drinking water. 239 chemicals. This is the pie chart on the right side, and nearly 50% of these are REACH chemicals. And if you transfer the PMT conclusion that we did on these 311 chemicals, first of all, you see that the white part is shrinking. So from those chemicals detected in water, we have more data available, so it's only 18%, but this is still a lot, right? We have chemicals in drinking water resources, and 18% of these we are not able to decide if they are persistent, or if they're mobile, or if they're toxic. And if you look at the small dark red part, this is increased. So within the detected chemicals, we have over 24% that are PMT, vPvM. And if you bring these two together, you see that the likelihood of a chemical that is PMT, vPvM from the REACH registration database is significantly higher to be detected. I'm not saying that this is all based on the persistency and mobility intrinsic substance properties. We heard today already that toxicity is one driver to sample chemicals. So there's much more in here than just persistency and mobility. But let's have a look a little bit more in detail on these numbers. So the left column is the REACH registration database. The second column is the detected chemicals in the drinking water or the media. And again, you see here the 41% and the 18% insufficient data. And then down here you see the UVA criteria and the CLP criteria in comparison. And it's very obvious what happens. So you reduce the PMT, vPM substances by switching the criteria, but you're increasing the non-PMT. And let's concentrate on these numbers here. And here is the, so if you bring these two numbers into ratio, you end up with the much higher likelihood. And if you look at these numbers here, you clearly see a trend going down from these criteria. So for persistent and mobile chemicals, the likelihood is still increased. For the potential one, you are around 1, which means random, doesn't have an effect. And for the not PMT, vPvM one, you are even reducing the likelihood. So PMT, vPvM substances pose an equivalent level of concern to PBT, vPvP substances. This has been shown analyzing very different line of argumentation. What we did is we asked water labs throughout Germany with a list of 150 substances, and 70% of these substances have an analytical gap, and additional 58% of these substances have a monitoring gap. We also looked at the remediation gap. 52% of this list of substances cannot be remedied either by ozonation or by active carbon. Additional 15% only ozonation, additional 21% only active carbon. And then we have this paper that we wrote together with Sarah, 2020. We analyzed different categories: serious effects on human health, serious effects on the environment, other effects, and the conclusion is that PMT, vPvM substances are substances of high concern, and the conclusion out of all this is that a safe level of exposure that would be protective cannot be determined, and any emissions into the environment over the whole life cycle must be minimized. And what we are now publishing as next is the UVA list of PMT, vPvM substances in the REACH registration database. This is actually the first update since we did this 2019 the first time. We have now 344 prioritized PMT substances using the UVA criteria on the list, and from these 344, 260 fulfill also the new hazard classes under CLP. And this UVA list is fit for purpose and ready to use, so all stakeholders can pick it up. Manufacturers, importers, downstream user can immediately use this list and to start minimize the emissions. The local authorities and the drinking water producers can use it for the monitoring approach, and we as member state competent authorities, ECHA and the European Commission, can identify SVHCs and already prepare for the process of CLP, and of course NGOs can inform their members, can encourage changes to that lead to lower use, lower environmental emissions, and use of less hazardous alternatives. So this list is ready to use, and of course we also used it. This was mainly done by my colleague Ivo Schriebner. We identified 2 substances from this list as HVAC. They are now on the candidate list, 1,4-dioxane and melamine. We heard already at the beginning from these. So UVA was a pioneer in developing the ELOC of Article 57F under REACH and in identifying PMT, vPvM substances as SVHC. And if you look at these huge, long processes and all the steps that has to be done, there was even a step in between where we had to, together with water producers from the Netherlands, with Ari Timmer, who is in the room, we had to create degradation data to really manage the identification of being an SVHC. So overall, you can conclude that the standardized assessment procedure and harmonized criteria are needed to reduce workload, to speed up decision, and what is very important, to increase the reliability for chemical industry, because they really want to know, is the chemical problematic chemical or not. They need clear criteria and clear guidance how to assess. So this overall leads to recommendations for a revision of the REACH authorization and restriction system. So under REACH, the simplified procedure for identifying SVHCs that have harmonized classification should be extended to the new hazard classes. We heard this already from Sylvan, and the Article 57 needs separate letter for these new hazard classes. We also heard about the generic approach to risk assessment that currently applies only to the restriction of 1A, 1B CMR and should, from our view, also be extended. The PMT vPvM is at the moment missing in the discussion, and it should also be extended to professional industrial use. And we already heard about the derogations, which should only be permitted to strictly controlled conditions when uses are necessary in health and safety or are critical for society and no alternatives are available. And within the Zero PM project, we listed regulation and directives that are relevant for PMT, vPvM substances. Ivo is already standing up for quite a while, putting pressure on me, so that's why I'm speeding up a little bit. You see,
it's okay. You have good time. Okay, you're ready. Yep, you can carry on.
He's.
Ivo's just reading.
So what we think, what is necessary, if you have a self-classification or harmonized classification, there should be a link from these new hazard classes to all these regulations and directives that deal with hazardous substances, and they're aiming in regulate hazardous substances. But then on the other hand, we have this regulation dealing with water media and environmental media. And here we see that this substance by substance approach is not sufficient. So here also a link to the new hazard classes, especially the PMT and vPvM hazard classes, should be implemented. The Water Framework Directive, the Groundwater Directive. We heard about the update of the Drinking Water Directive, where we now have, for the first time, a watch list. It would be good to have a link from a harmonized classification into these directives. On the other hand, if we find monitoring data, the link should go the other way around to the slide I showed you before, and to lead to pollution prevention at the source measures. And then this slide, there's so many voluntary emission reduction measures that are taken by industry. And in my personal view, the European chemical industry should really be the leadership on chemical safety. And the shift is needed towards a proactive approach of demonstrating safety and sustainability in pre-commercial innovations. I really personally don't understand why it's happening always and always again that we are using a chemical for years and decades and only afterwards find out that it was not a good idea to do so. So again, the classification is an instrument that should trigger a wide range of voluntary measures. We have branch-specific lists of unwanted substances. We have the safe and sustainable by design. We heard already today about the eco-label. We have our own eco-label, Blauer Engel in Germany, which is given by the UVA. We have the SIN list. We have a dialogue between industry, which is called the Spurenstoff dialogue. So it's for few chemicals every year to discuss. So this all can be used based on the CLP criteria. So last slide, Ivo, you can already sit down again. Conclusion: the implementation of the PMT vPvM criteria to the CLP and REACH regulation is, in our view, an essential step to the protection of European drinking water resources. And last but not least, UBA will also support water producers to prioritize for monitoring and assess contaminants in the water cycle, for example, with a very simple, very cheap OECD degradation test. I put all the literature in my slides, and the last thing is an invitation. We will have a PMT session on the ICC conference in Venice in June, so please all come to Venice. The deadline for your abstracts is the 3rd of March, and we will also be on the CTEC in April and May in Dublin. I hope they will be open again late submission for posters. Let's see, and that's from my side. Thank you very much.
Zero PM. Zero pollution of persistent and mobile substances. This project has received funding from the European Union's Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Programme under Grant Agreement number 101036756.